All right, so I'm going to go ahead and let's just jump into my little PowerPoint here. Welcome everybody to RPI office hours. If you haven't done this with us before, it's just something where we're trying to show you some functionality with stuff that we've worked with in the past to hopefully help you out with things that you need for your business. So, let's see if I can close that. There we go. Okay, so we only have a few slides to go through. Essentially what I'll do is just kind of talk to you about some upcoming stuff that we've got going on, kind of give you an idea of what office hours is, and then we'll just jump straight into our application plan presentation. So first of all, hello, I'm Michael Madsen. I'm a lead consultant at RPI Consultants. I've worked with Perceptive Content software for around 6 years. Specializing in back office and higher education solutions, but we all kind of run the gamut on all of the other types of businesses as well, so not just focused on those. We have some upcoming webinars, so we generally do webinars every month. The next ones coming up are going to be just a What's New in Kofax and What's New in Kofax RSO, and those are both going to be on November 6th. So if those interest you at all, please hop over to our website and sign up for those. And then the next office hours presentation is going to be on November 15th to talk a little bit about perceptive experience, what you can do with that and how it works. To give you some background around RPI Consultants, we have over 100 full-time consultants kind of scattered throughout the country. We have offices in Tampa, Baltimore, and here in Kansas City where we're located. Most of our ImageNow consultants are in the Kansas City office. We specialize in a lot of different things. We can kind of cover any kind of consulting needs you need. We have project managers. We have technical architects. We can kind of we're essentially your one-stop shop for consulting around your imaging software. And then what is RPI office hours? So I've mentioned it a little bit before, but really what we're going to do today is just kind of go through the AppGetData functionality around your learn modes and how we can work those in. A lot of people had issues after the ImageNow upgrade using the older functionality that caused a big slowdown with their application plans. And this is kind of a way to fix that to get around those issues. So I'm going to give you kind of a live demonstration on what we've built in our test environment. And I have some VB script code that I've put together to make it work. So feel free, if you want the code, you can request it from us. We're happy to give it over to you so that you can kind of play with it yourself in your environment and kind of teach yourself some things. It's just we have kind of a basic presentation, so just keep in mind there's a lot of stuff you can do with this functionality. So don't feel like what we have set up is your only option. There's a lot of stuff online. You can go to the community portal website where you can find a lot of knowledge base articles around how to do how to accomplish specific functionality. And then I'll also show you on docs.highland.com how you can get to the original setup guide for what we're going to be using. And then after I go through my presentation, feel free, or even while I'm giving my presentation, feel free to throw questions into GoToWebinar, and we'll try to hit those. So one thing to keep in mind, though, is that any recommendations and advice we provide aren't guaranteed. I'm kind of just working through this with you, and I'll give you as much information as I have. I'm not going to know the answer to every single question right here, and we aren't going to have enough time to cover every single thing, so just keep that in mind. This is really just supposed to be a jumping off point for you so that you have a better idea of what you need to do to get this done. And then obviously, if you do this, be sure to test in your test environment, not in your development or not in your production environment, but that should be pretty obvious. So today, for application plans, we're going to be talking about the AppGetData functionality, and we'll be going through VB script. So it's not a huge presentation. We're just talking about AppGetData, try to show you how we can get around using the old AppGetTree, but that's essentially what we're covering. So let me flip out of my PowerPoint here, and I'm going to jump into our test environment where I've got this started. Actually, I'm sorry. I'm going to go first to the documentation. So when it comes to the functionality that we're talking about, technically, Highland does not have documentation around how to build this out generically. They have it only, the documentation specifically around Illusion. So we're just going to use that because it is functional with other pieces or other systems. So I'm just going to show you how to get the documentation to give you the jumping off point. And then we'll kind of edit that code, or I'll show you what I've done to edit the code for us to make it work with Lawson, because I'm going to be using it with Lawson as the example. So docs.highland.com will bring you to this page where we have a whole bunch of different documentation for different Highland products. Generally, if I'm working on something and I need to find documentation around something, this is going to be the first place that I come to. You can try to find exactly what you're looking through the huge list, but I know what I'm looking for, so I'm just going to search for it from the search bar. So AppGetTree, and just putting in my AppGetTree in search pulls up my search results for the solution learn mode that we're going to open up. And again, even though it says solution, we're just going to pull what we need from this so that we can edit it. So this document's pretty big, goes through a lot of different stuff here, but in the table of contents, I see this AppGetTree option, so I'm just going to jump straight down to that. Get through some of the fluff here. And you can see on this page, I have my script template. So this is what I start out with. If I am doing this from scratch and I want to create an application plan that's going to utilize this new functionality, I'm going to take this script template that they have and copy it directly out of this document so that I can build off of this. Now, one thing to note is there's a lot of stuff set up in here that's going to point to stuff that we are not actually using. Like, for example, these highlighted search values are things that I can trim out. I'm not necessarily wanting to link to this parent node or anything like that. So this does take a little bit of effort on your end to try to get to work the way that you need it to. So don't just drop this in expecting it to work right away. You can also see, like, down at the bottom, they're assigning specific fields, specific values to these different fields, and these fields aren't necessarily what we're going to be using in the application plan. So just use this as your starting point and then edit it from there. So just to speed this up a little bit, I've taken all of this code out already and kind of put together my own setup. So this is my script that I put together to work with my application plan that I have in my test environment. I guess I'll jump in before I get too deep into this code. I'll jump into the management console where I actually have that. So just like any other application plan, like a traditional one that you might set up, you're just going to create your normal learn mode application plan. I have one here called AppGetTree invoice linking. I'm just using the viewpoint type. And inside of here, just like you're used to, you can set up your screen. So this is the Lawson screen that I'll be pulling from. You can see that I already have some data in here that I plan on using for my script. And I have my identifier in here with my wildcard, just like you normally would. I can capture it if I want to just make sure that it's pulling it in, which it looks like it's not displaying correctly here, but it's working. So the nice thing about using this functionality is that a lot of the time when you guys are setting these up, you're going to have to do some kind of pinning, or if you have specific scripting that you want to add to each item, you would need to add them to your dictionary values individually. With this VB script, I can take my whole script for every single value and just tie it to 1, because when it runs for 1, it'll run it for all of them. So I have already kind of set up my mapping. So if I had a true document that I was wanting to link this to, I set up my vendor number, vendor name, invoice number, invoice amount, all based on my dictionary values on the left side here. But for the script, all I did was I just tied it to invoice number. So if I open up any of these, you're going to see I don't have any kind of processing script tied to any of my other values here. It's only on invoice number right now. So there's my AppGetTree script. If you needed to add a new one or you needed to create it from scratch, you can just click Add Script and then click Create, and it'll open up a new script for you to type in, and then you can modify that to create your new script, but we don't need to do that. So let me double click on this. Open up AppGetTree. So here is my code for that AppGetTree functionality. So everything that's in here is essentially just what I have built out inside of my Notepad++ here. And I wanted to put it in here just because I know that this is kind of hard to read. I mean, it's really kind of hard to read anyway, but it's a little bit easier to see some of the stuff that I'm doing here. So one of the things that you'll notice in the documentation, after we've grabbed our script and after we've grabbed our script logic and our everything, we can go to the Apply Script section inside of that document. The Apply Script section is going to be kind of what walks you through how to get this set up, because before we can grab our values, we need to grab the tree so that we see where our values are located. And the tree, once we build that out, is going to look a little bit like it used to using the older style. If anybody remembers using ACC Explorer and having to map out every single node and putting in your numbers, pipe, number pipe over and over again just to get to your one field, this is essentially replacing that. You still sometimes have to do some counting, but it's not near as complicated as having to use ACC Explorer. So again, one thing to mention is this is written around using Banner 9, but the basic principles are the same. So the first thing that you're going to hit when you're kind of working through this documentation is they're going to be talking about this dev out tree here. The dev out tree inside of the script, which you can see in there, let me just pull up Notepad++. Inside of my script, I have my dev out tree. It's commented out right now because I don't want to build the tree every single time. But essentially what this is doing is if I uncomment this and run that application plan, it's going to run this dev out function where it's going to create my tree in a text file in a directory that I specify inside of that function, so that I have something to look at to see where my values are actually located within the tree. So the first thing that I'll do is come in here to my code that's actually running, and I'm going to uncomment that out. And I don't need to save this and run it or anything like that. I can just click test right here, and what it's going to do is it'll pop up a notepad file that contains my entire tree. So I just click test, and it popped this up for me, which is the entire tree of my Lawson screen here. If you close out of this by accident or lose it, that's fine, because it's still saving that file to whichever directory you set it to. So if I wanted to open it in Notepad++ or something to make it a little bit easier for me to look at, I can do that. And you can always rerun it. So if you lose it for some reason, just rerun it and it'll recreate it. So in my application plan, I'm wanting to pull invoice number, vendor name, and invoice amount. So if I look on the Lawson screen, you can see I have my invoice number, my vendor name, and my invoice amount here. So these are going to be the values that I'm looking for inside of that tree. So the easiest thing to do is if I already know what it is, so I know my vendor number, or I know my invoice number is invoice 123456. Just going to copy that out, take a look inside of here for invoice number 123456. When I search, I can see that number inside of the tree here. So now it's just a matter of how do I actually get to this number. Inside of my code, I have these split functions where I'm basically splitting out all of my nodes into an array. So inside of this logic right here, I'm just looping one by one through each node, trying to find an identifier and anchor that I'm connecting to. This is going to be different for every single system that you're trying to apply this to. So for me, when I was taking a look at my output, let me just get it over here so that I don't have to keep jumping back and forth. What would be nice is if Lawson made it so that inside of the tree I had an easy identifier like invoice number right here. That would make it a lot easier for me to just anchor off of specifically this field to know that that's exactly where I need to be, but it's not like that. So we've got to figure out how to actually get down here. I can't just do the text brackets because I have text brackets all over the place. So if I try to do that, I'm either not going to pull a value at all or pull the wrong value. So what I want to do is try to find something that's unique that I can anchor off of to count down from. So if I move backwards in this list, I hit this label buyer code. Label buyer code is what I'm using pretty much for all of these because you can see I've got my invoice number, my vendor number, pretty much everything that I'm looking for is underneath buyer code in this same kind of area. So when I'm setting up my code, let me move this over. If I am trying to get vendor number, which is this 100004 number, I'm saying let's anchor off of label buyer code, and I'm moving down 2 lines. So 1, 2, right? So just putting in the line +2 inside of this logic right here is going to automatically move it down to pull this information. The problem is that we can't just do that. Like if I see this get name to function that I have here, if I didn't have this and I was just trying to pull that node, I'm going to pull more information than I need because it's going to pull that whole line. So I basically have to create a function that kind of trims that up for me. So the original script that's in the documentation, they use this get name function. And if you look in my script, I'm still using that original get name function for vendor name, but I'll explain the differences here in just a second. So if I look at get name, the original get name function that was in the Banner software, you can see that what they're trying to do is pull the value in between brackets, right? So my value is not in between brackets here, so it's not going to find the right value if I try to use this get name function. I do have other values that are, which is kind of what I was getting at a minute ago. So like if I'm looking at, let me find my vendor name here, right here. So inside of Lawson, my vendor name is AHCA, and I can see that in my tree here as bracket AHCA. The reason it's doing that is because it's technically a label. It's not like a text field or anything like that. So this get name function, looking for the value in between the brackets, will work for my vendor name, but for my invoice number, it's not going to work because my invoice number is behind that arrow. So I basically just copied this out. I copied this this function, recreated it, gave it get name to instead of get name, and then I updated it so that it's looking for whatever value is behind the arrow, and then I'm ending my substring at the length of what's behind the arrow. So this should get me this entire value right here. I also added in some trims, and the only reason that I did that was that I noticed on, I believe it was, vendor number here. you can see, especially with Lawson, if anybody works with Lawson, Lawson likes to add in a lot of blank spaces in the values. So for my vendor number here, when I pulled it in using this get name function without this left trim, right trim, it would pull it in including these white spaces, which is not what I want to pull into the document. I just want the the vendor number period. So I added in the left trim and the right trim just to clear out any additional spaces in front of or behind the number value that I'm wanting to capture. So after creating this second get name function so that I can actually hit all of my values here, I essentially just go through and anything that isn't in a bracket, which is essentially everything except for vendor name, I give it that function and I count out from my buyer code. So my vendor number is 2 behind buyer code. My invoice number is 15 behind buyer code, and so on and so forth. 2, 15, 31, 23. So that's how I come to those numbers. So I already went through why we're using the brackets on this guy, so that's why he has the get name instead of get name too. So once I have all of this in, now it's just a matter of testing it against what I have in Lawson to make sure that it's actually pulling back in my fields in the application plan. So I'm going to jump back to the application plan here. I'm going to comment deb out so that we don't generate that text file again. I'm going to click OK. And then I'm going to go ahead and just hit test dictionary. So if I hit this blue button, it's just going to test the script that I have set up. And you can see in my columns for invoice number, I'm pulling back the correct invoice number. I'm pulling back the correct vendor number, vendor name, invoice amount. And you can see that it only took 0.8 seconds to run that lookup. So it fixed a lot of our speed issues with the older version because some of those were taking 15 seconds or more to pull back, and it just got ridiculous with linking queues. So it definitely fixes those problems. To give you another example, like if we wanted to add in a new item, so let's say that I wanted to pull in my vendor address here. To pull in vendor address, I'm going to do the exact same thing. So I'm going to take this logic that I have where I'm looping through all my nodes here. I'll take this logic, copy that out, put another one in. And the reason that I'm using, well, actually, let me show you it here. So yeah, it actually shows up right here. So this is the same vendor address that was showing up inside of Lawson. So the reason that I'm copying my vendor name functionality instead of my invoice amount functionality is because my vendor address is in between these brackets. So I want to use, this is another example of wanting to use get names instead of get names too. So for here, I'm still checking off of buyer code because buyer code is still the anchor element that I'm taking a look at here. And I'm going to update my value that I'm applying it to, because if I do this, well, I need to add one more item down here. So my fields, I guess one thing to mention too, is that my fields here, so if I'm saying my field of invoice amount, this is linking back to those dictionary values that I've mapped out inside of the application plan. So, oh, I think I still have my test window open. So these values here instead of my dictionary. So the first thing I want to do is just add a new dictionary item called vendor address. Now I have that. I'll take this guy right here, copy that, say vendor address here instead of invoice amount. And you can see that for each field, I'm making it equal an item that I've found inside of my loop here. So I don't want to do invoice amount. I've got to update this guy to match vendor address. So I'll just have vendor address. So now that I've created this, my vendor address is going to equal my get name value for this node, and I'm tying it back to vendor address. However, I haven't updated my count yet, so it's still going to just pull back vendor name for vendor address. So the easiest thing to do here is just find one that's close. So like the vendor name is 23, so this is where I'm pulling vendor name right here. So I can just count down from here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 29. That was what I had before. I think I updated some of these numbers. Yes, I did. 2, 15, 31, 23. Oops. 23, oh, that does work. Okay. 2, 15, 31, 23. So then 29 should be my vendor address. Take my code here. Drop that in. There. One more width of the same. Let's do it. Click OK on it. Okay. Oh, I did not comment out my dev out. Run it, and you can see that I've now pulled in vendor address into that vendor address field. So, I mean, this gives kind of the basic functionality of how this works. Does anybody, if anybody has any questions, let us know in the question section inside of GoToWebinar. One thing to point out too, while anybody's asking any questions, is there's a lot of functionality that you can add into this that we didn't just for this easy demonstration. Like you can do anything that you could originally do in VB script, you can do here. So just because I'm pulling the values in directly from my tree doesn't mean that I can't get creative with how to create the value inside of the application plan. Like for instance, let's say that for the address, let's say that maybe all of my vendor addresses have some address 1 number and then a dash with some additional information. And maybe I just want to grab anything before that hyphen. You can add into VB script any kind of data massaging that you want to inside of that application script. So if you want to pull out the trailing characters from your address and only grab that first value, you can throw that in the script as well. You can do whatever you want inside of that. This is just kind of a basic example of how to grab those fields.
So we have a question. I wonder if you can do AppGetTree for more than one screen. The person who asked that, could you clarify that question? Maybe walk through how we identify the screen in the script.
Yeah. Okay. So, just like how, so if we're looking at just the application plan, where I'm doing my screen identifier for info loss and basic invoice, I have to add that into the script as well. So in this value, I'm doing my find window here. So it's the exact same thing. I still have to send it find the window that I'm trying to pull the data from. So I don't think you're going to be able to, if you had multiple screens, I think you'd have to build additional application plans for those additional screens, just because, unless, I suppose you could potentially put in VB script logic to loop through different windows if you were trying to grab multiple values from different windows, but your script is just going to get kind of complicated as you move forward with that. Again, anything you can do in VB script, you can do inside of this. Can we build a new screen too?
Yeah, and I think we're still not quite clear on what the question is there. We can certainly reach out after this to discuss a little further. Another question is, does this solution apply to IE11?
Yeah, I mean, IE11. I generally build these out in Chrome just because we have fewer issues with it. But I mean, IE11 would have a tree, so you could set it up with IE11.
I think there's something about 32-bit, 64-bit.
John's taking a look and thinks there's something around 32-bit versus 64-bit that might be an issue. To kind of go back to that different screen item, kind of what I was talking about was that if we have in our visual, in our code here, my find window for this specific window, you technically could create like a new value, h2 equals find window, find window, and then add in whatever your next window is that you're selecting from. The only thing is that you'd have to build your error handling around how it grabs it, because you can see right down under here, if your first window is built out and it doesn't return a value, it's going to pop up this message box with window not found. But again, you can just clear that out. So you just have to get kind of creative with your code.
Does not work on 32-bit.
Does not, okay, so it does not work
OSs in applications.
on 32-bit operating systems or applications.
So that means no 32-bit Windows 7, which I think is the last operating system that would apply to.
Edge. I'm not sure about Edge.
It should work in Edge.
I mean, Edge, yeah, Edge would be.
It should theoretically work on anything because it's using a Windows API.
Mm-hmm. As far as the PeopleSoft question goes, somebody asked if we could share the AppGetTree script for PeopleSoft. My test environment, the only thing that I have access to is Lawson, so that's why I built it out with Lawson. I imagine that we potentially have some PeopleSoft code around for pulling the information. So if I find it, if you want to send us an email or something asking for it, then we can reply, try to send you what we have if we have something for PeopleSoft. I mean, it should be the same idea. You just build out the tree and then find your mapping inside of that tree. But if we have anything PeopleSoft specific, then we'll definitely get it over to you.
PeopleSoft suffers from the exact same problem as Lawson with that vendor name field, where it's populated as a label, which is where we would typically need these scripts. So yeah, the script would be almost exactly the same. You would just change the mapping.
Yep. So what John's talking about there is just where I had to add in these two different get name functions for the script inside of the label with brackets versus the actual text field value.
Another request for PeopleSoft. And if anybody wants to share their screen, we could take a stab at walking through building a PeopleSoft script. No promises on whether we can get through it. Do you have the minimum requirements in front of you or in the documentation?
Let's see. I'm not sure if it's there. I'll check here. Might just questions in here. It does not look like it. At least not in this. Maybe in intro, I doubt. Yeah, it doesn't look like there's any minimum requirements.
I think, what about the top? Yeah, right there at the top. So in the very first page, so you see how it says 715?
Oh, yeah.
So you do have to be on those versions to use this, or higher. Will AppTree work with NetSuite? I don't know if we've seen that one.
I'm not sure it has.
So it'll work as long as, if you can see if you just right click on a page, like go to Lawson real quick. Do the source.
It does not like F12. Source.
Just punch in a 1 there. And right click on the page.
Oh, yeah.
So as long as you can see the values that you're trying to get to inside of the page source, I mean, they should be in here somewhere. Or not, maybe not the source, but it should be in here somewhere.
I think it's the source based on the table that you're clicking on.
Or am I thinking of DevTools?
I think you're thinking of DevTools. That's what I was trying to get to.
So you should be able to see the code behind the page. Inspect.
Yeah, here it is.
So somewhere in this tree are the values that we're trying to get to. So basically, all that AppTree, the get AppTree is going to do is pull down this structure in a little bit different way and allow us to get to the values via code. So as long as NetSuite has these exposed and they're not framed inside of some sort of Flash or Java application, we should be able to get to them.
Yep. And the nice thing about using Chrome is just what you're seeing, what I'm doing on the screen here. This just lets us know for sure that we're going to be able to see this stuff. See how it's highlighting that 1 when I get over in this section in the page source here. So that's how I know for sure that it's going to show up in my tree.
Next question, should we be using Window Walker or Viewpoint, or does it matter?
I normally use Viewpoint, but
it doesn't.
Yeah.
The only one I would say don't use is Internet Explorer, because it actually, every time it loads, it has a little overhead.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever tried to get this to work with Blackbound? I have not ever even heard of Blackbound.
No, I have not.
Certainly willing to try. Impressive solution, much appreciated.
Well, thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, so if you have any other questions, feel free to throw them in there. Great questions so far. Yeah.
And again, if you want the code, just let us know, because I've already kind of gone through and cleaned up some of the extra stuff that's in that Elution code. Any of the stuff that we didn't need, like if we're looking inside of here at our AppTree information, there's a lot of stuff in here that we just do not need. Like, I'm not searching based on any kind of regex or basing off of like finding the anchor automatically. I'm literally just typing it in and telling it exactly where to go. So there's a lot of functionality in here that I'm just not using, that I've pulled out. But I keep going back to this, but you can get as creative as you want with it. Another thing that we've run into is how I'm grabbing the chunks of the tree. So like right here in this section, you see my tree chunks, or my app-get tree, and they're passing in this parent element, right? So in my code, I'm pulling my Notepad++ here. In my code, I am not doing that. Where is it? Right here. So in my code, I'm setting the tree chunks as the entire tree. So I did not put in a parent element to base off of. And the reason you might want to do that is that sometimes it's just easier to work with that way. So if I'm taking a look at the tree that's returned, let me move this back out to my other Notepad++ here. Pretty much anything inside of this tree that you see a plus in front of is considered like that parent element. So whereas I'm pulling everything in right here, I could just say, I just want to pull in my basic invoice section. So that way it only returns the stuff, the nodes where I know specifically my values are located, because these are all just child elements to that parent element. So if you do that, it can be a little bit easier just to find what you're looking for, but it's also a little finicky. So depending on what version of browser you're using or how you're setting stuff up, it can be a little frustrating figuring out how to actually get that syntax perfectly right to get it pulled in. So I tried for a little while to get it to work specifically only with this section, but it was not returning in my version for some reason, so I just got the whole tree. But if you have a lot of time to sit down with it and break it all out, you can really make it extremely efficient. I didn't worry too much about it because my values are returning in under a second anyway, so there didn't seem to be a point to do that. But if you have a much larger application where that tree is huge and it does seem like it's taking a little bit of time to loop through every single node value, you might want to add in that parent element so that you can just grab the section you need.
Another question is, will we share the script?
Yes. Maybe we should just email it.
Yeah,
to
we'll just
webinar attendees.
When we send out the slide deck, I think we can attach it, or maybe we can't attach it. We'll send out a download link. I don't think most emails take too kindly to scripts being attached.
Yeah, so when we send out the slides, we'll send the script along with it, either in the email or as a download link from Box or something like that.
Couple notes just from our experience is that we have generally found that you should only need to build one script per browser. So whereas pretty often right now with the AppGetData, you have to build one script per user even. This is a lot more robust. And so there are going to be differences between, say, someone that uses Firefox and Chrome. But among users that are using Chrome, you should only take one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's mainly because we can actually use that anchor now instead of manually putting in every single number in those pipes like we had to do with ACC Explorer. So now that we actually have something that we can anchor onto, it's a lot easier to make it work with everybody's system instead of having to manually go through and put in all those if statements to go through every single possibility.
You want to just try Internet Explorer real quick? Just to see if it pulls the tree down. I'm not 100% sure that Lawson will even load correctly in IE11.
Yeah, I don't think I've tried it.
Okay. No.
All right.
I guess I should just try a different page. Just, I don't know, MSN or something. I don't think it's going to load.
All right. Get these out of here. There we go. Okay. See if we actually capture it. right. Script here. Oh, there it goes. Gotta find where that was. Take that out of there. Doesn't seem like it's liking it. Oh, there it goes. Yep, it did it. So yeah, so since all I'm doing is just logging out the tree of the page, I don't really need to change anything else in the script yet. Obviously, my values aren't going to work using just the MSN page. But if all I'm wanting to do is log out the tree, I just uncomment this out. Again, put in my find window value, and it spit out my MSN tree here. So should work.
And Edge, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Pull that over. Just close out your IE and.
I wonder if Edge is on. Oops. I don't know if we have Edge on the server.
Weird. I guess it's too old. Okay. Okay. Well, if there's any other questions, feel free to submit them. I think we're about ready to wrap up here. Anything else you want to cover?
Yeah, I guess the only other thing would be, I mean, we went through how to put the script together, but kind of skipped over just how to set up the application plan period. This is all going to be the exact same as how you set up your normal application plans. The only difference is just how we're applying the script to the field. So if you're familiar with setting up application plans, it's going to be the same. It's just going to be using this script instead of a different one. So setting it up in like a workflow queue with the link and everything, all of that's still the same. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining. We'll send out the slides, and I'll get my script added to that so that everybody kind of just has a copy of my script. Don't forget to go to docs.highland.com to search for that AppGetData documentation. That'll help you out. There's a lot of stuff in there that you don't need, but it's a nice place to go if you need to grab that just template for the script to use that as a jumping off point.
One last thing, if I understand, your script is based on the Highland script, but you added /develop and improved it.
Yes. Yes. So just like
mostly trimmed it down.
Yeah, I just kind of changed it. So I just took out stuff that I wasn't using, and then I added in a function to do an additional massage on some of my other values. So the original function that was in there would have only pulled my values between brackets. So I just added in a second function that was a mirror image of that to pull my values after the arrow instead of inside of the brackets. So it's still pretty much the same script. I just took out anything I didn't need and added in that extra massage step.
Ultimately, it's scripting, so there's a million ways to skin it.
Yep, and you can add in whatever you want it works with VB script, so whatever VB scripting you add in, it'll work with, so you can get pretty creative with it. All right, well, thank you, everybody, and we will get those sent out. We hope to see you in the next office hours, and don't forget to check out our webinars. Thank you.